Blood dripped slowly from the examination table onto the sterile white floor of the research lab, each drop echoing in the silence like a countdown timer. Dr. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her protective gloves and stared at the unconscious human, male strapped to the bioscanner platform, wondering how someone could survive what this man had clearly endured. The prisoner had arrived 3 hours ago aboard a transport vessel from the Outer Rim territories, his body covered in burns and scars that defied medical explanation. According to the transport manifest, his name was David Chen, age 32, former Earth Defense Corps officer who had been captured during a failed assault on something called Terminus 7, Monitor 4. "Begin full biological analysis," Sarah commanded, stepping back as the advanced scanning array descended from the ceiling. The machine hummed to life, its blue energy beams washing over David's unconscious form, like gentle waves of light. The artificial intelligence that operated the research vessel Horizon's Edge had been designed by the finest minds on Earth, capable of analyzing alien biology down to the molecular level. If anyone could figure out what had happened to this man, it would be Monitor 4. "Preliminary scan complete, Dr. Mitchell." The AI's calm voice filled the laboratory. "Subject exhibits standard human physiology with several anomalous readings. Initiating deep tissue analysis now." Sarah moved to her workstation and pulled up the initial results on her holographic display. David's vital signs were stable, but showed elevated levels of neural activity even while unconscious. His bone density was 30% higher than normal for a human male his age, and his muscle fibers displayed an unusual crystalline structure she had never seen before. "Doctor, you need to see this," called her assistant, Dr. James Park, from across the lab. He was examining tissue samples taken from David's injuries. "The cellular regeneration rate is incredible. These burns should have taken months to heal, but they're showing signs of advanced recovery after just a few days." Sarah frowned and walked over to examine the microscopic images on James's screen. The burned tissue was indeed healing at an impossible rate, but more importantly, there appeared to be some kind of foreign material embedded in the damaged cells. Tiny metallic structures that pulsed with their own energy signature. "What are those?" she asked, pointing at the microscopic anomalies. "I have no idea," James replied. "They're not organic, but they're perfectly integrated with his biological systems. It's like they belong there." Before Sarah could respond, Monitor 4's voice interrupted their discussion. "Dr. Mitchell, I have completed the full body scan. You will want to review these results immediately. I am detecting multiple energy signatures across the subject's dorsal region that do not match any known technology in our database." Sarah hurried back to the main scanner display and gasped at what she saw. David's back was covered in what appeared to be burn scars, but the scanner revealed them to be something far more complex. The marks formed intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own internal light, invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible to Monitor 4's. "Advanced sensors, these markings," Sarah whispered, tracing the patterns with her finger on the holographic display. "They're not random, they're some kind of circuit or matrix." "Indeed, Dr. Mitchell. The energy patterns are highly organized and appear to be integrated with the subject's nervous system. I am attempting to decode their purpose now." Minutes passed in tense silence as the AI worked to analyze the mysterious markings. Sarah found herself holding her breath, sensing that they were on the verge of a discovery that could change everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Finally, Monitor 4's voice returned, but there was something different about its tone, something that almost sounded like awe. "Analysis complete," the AI announced. "Cross-referencing with all available databases, results are unprecedented. The markings contain technological signatures that predate known galactic civilizations by several million years. They appear to be some form of advanced nanotechnology that has bonded permanently with the subject's biological systems." Sarah felt her heart racing. Nanotechnology? From where? Who could have done this to him? Unknown. However, I have found one reference in the historical archives that may be relevant. Ancient texts recovered from ascended ruins mention something called divine judgment fires that were used to test the worthiness of lesser beings. Those who survived were marked as either blessed or cursed, depending on the translation. The mention of the Ascended sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The ancient alien race had ruled much of the galaxy for millennia, claiming to be divine beings worthy of absolute worship and obedience. Their technology was so advanced that most species accepted their claims without question. "Are you saying the Ascended did this to him?" Sarah asked. "That is one possibility. However, there is something else. The energy signature from these markings matches no known Ascended technology. If anything, they appear to be far more advanced. I am detecting quantum-level manipulation. That exceeds current theoretical limits." Before Sarah could process this information fully, David stirred on the examination table. His eyes fluttered open, and he tried to sit up against the restraints. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarse but strong. "What have you done to me?" Sarah approached the table slowly, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "You're safe, Mr. Chen. You're aboard the research vessel Horizon's Edge. We're trying to understand. What happened to you?" David's eyes darted around the laboratory, taking in the advanced equipment and holographic displays. "You're studying me like some kind of specimen just like they did?" "Who?" Sarah asked gently. "Who studied you before?" David's expression darkened. "The ones who call themselves gods, the Ascended. They put me in their judgment chamber and expected me to burn like all the others. But something went wrong. With their divine fire, instead of killing me, it marked me." Monitor 4's voice filled the room again. "Mr. Chen, I have been analyzing the markings on your back. My preliminary assessment suggests they are not of Ascended origin. The technology appears to be far older and more sophisticated." David laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the Ascended guards who nearly fainted when I walked out of their judgment chamber alive. They kept saying something about marks that only the defiant ones carry. They were terrified of me." Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to tell us exactly what happened on Terminus 7? Your experience might help us understand not just what was done to you, but what it means for humanity." David studied her face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "If it helps other humans avoid what I went through, then yes, but first, you need to understand something. The Ascended aren't gods, they're afraid. And after what happened in that chamber, I think I know why." As Monitor 4 continued its analysis in the background, Sarah realized they had stumbled upon something that could shake the very foundations of galactic civilization. The markings on David's back were more than just scars. They were proof that humanity might possess capabilities that even the self-proclaimed gods feared. The discovery would change everything, but first they needed to understand what they were dealing with, and why the most powerful beings in the galaxy were so terrified of humans who refused to kneel. Three days had passed since David Chen first opened his eyes in the research lab, and Dr. Sarah Mitchell was beginning to understand that she was dealing with something far beyond conventional science. David had finally agreed to share his story, but only after Monitor 4 confirmed that the ship's communications were completely secure from Ascended surveillance. "It started 6 months ago," David began, sitting upright on the medical bed as Sarah and her team gathered around. "Our resistance cell had been tracking Ascended supply routes through the outer rim. We discovered they were transporting something to Terminus 7, something they called divine relics." James Park looked up from his data pad. "Divine relics? What kind of objects?" David's expression grew distant. "Ancient devices, crystalline structures about the size of a human torso, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Our intelligence suggested the Ascended were using them to test captured humans. Anyone who failed their tests simply disappeared." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "And you decided to infiltrate their facility?" "We had to try," David replied. 12 members of our cell volunteered for the mission. We knew it was suicide, but we couldn't let them keep experimenting on our people. The plan was simple: get inside, destroy their testing facility, and extract any survivors. Monitor 4's voice interrupted. "Mr. Chen, based on your biometric readings during this recollection, you are experiencing significant emotional stress. Perhaps we should pause." "No," David said firmly. "They need to hear this, all of it." He took a deep breath and continued. We infiltrated Terminus 7 using stolen Ascended transport codes. The facility was massive, built into a mountain that had been hollowed. Out over centuries inside, we found hundreds of holding cells containing humans from dozens of different worlds. Men, women, children, all waiting for their turn in what the Ascended called the Judgment Chamber. Sarah noticed that David's hands were beginning to shake. She moved closer and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. What happened when you found the chamber? It was incredible and terrible at the same time, David whispered. A circular room with walls made of that same crystalline material, but these crystals were the size of buildings. They hummed with energy that made your teeth ache. In the center was a platform where they strapped down the test subjects. James leaned forward. What kind of tests were they performing? David's jaw clenched. They called it divine judgment. The Ascended believed their crystals could separate the worthy from the unworthy. Those they deemed worthy would supposedly ascend to serve them. The unworthy would be consumed by divine fire as punishment for their inadequacy. But you survived, Sarah observed. What made your experience different? I don't know, David admitted. By the time we reached the chamber, Ascended guards had captured most of my team. They decided to use me as a demonstration, show the other prisoners what happens to humans who dare oppose their divine authority. Monitor 4 spoke up. The energy readings from your markings are fluctuating. It appears your emotional state affects their activity. David looked down at his hands, which were beginning to emit a faint blue glow. That started happening. After the chamber, the Ascended strapped me to their platform and activated their divine fire. I expected to die instantly like all the others. Instead, something impossible happened. He stood up and turned around, lifting his shirt, to reveal the intricate patterns of scars across his back. As the team watched in amazement, the marks began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with David's heartbeat. The fire didn't burn me, David continued. It felt warm at first, then hot but not painful. The energy from the crystals flowed into me instead of destroying me. I could feel something changing in my body at the cellular level. The Ascended guards started backing away in terror. Sarah stared at the glowing patterns. What were they afraid of? Me, David said simply. When the process was complete, I broke free from the restraints like they were made of paper. My strength, speed, reflexes, everything was enhanced. But more than that, I could sense things, energy patterns, technological weaknesses, the emotional states of everyone around me. James was frantically taking notes. The nanites, they must have integrated with your nervous system. But how is that possible? The technology required. That's what I've been trying to figure out, David interrupted. Because the Ascended were as surprised as I was, one of their leaders, a being called High Curator Vental, kept repeating the same phrase over and over. Only those who defy gods carry these marks. He seemed to recognize what was happening, but he was terrified by it. Monitor 4's analysis had been running constantly during David's story. Dr. Mitchell, I believe I have discovered something significant. The energy signatures from Mr. Chen's markings match quantum resonance patterns found in several archaeological sites across the galaxy, sites that predate Ascended civilization by millions of years. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Are you saying these nanites are from an earlier civilization? That appears to be the case. The technology is far more advanced than anything in current galactic databases. If I may theorize, it seems the Ascended discovered these devices but never fully understood their purpose. They have been using them incorrectly for millennia. David nodded grimly. That would explain why they were so shocked when their divine judgment actually worked the way it was supposed to. After I escaped from the chamber, I freed the other prisoners and fought my way out of the facility. But before I left, I overheard High Curator Vental talking to his subordinates. What did he say? Sarah asked. He said the ancient warnings were true, that the architects, whoever they were, had left behind tests to identify species capable of inheriting their legacy. The Ascended have been using those tests as weapons of control, never realizing they were actually awakening something they couldn't contain. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. David, are you saying there might be others like you, other humans who have survived these judgment chambers? I hope so, David replied. Because during my escape I felt something, a connection, like distant voices calling out, there are others out there, scattered across the galaxy, others who carry these marks, others who have refused to bow to false gods. Monitor 4's sensors suddenly activated throughout the ship. Dr. Mitchell, I am detecting multiple energy signatures approaching our position. Configuration suggests an ascended patrol fleet. They appear to be conducting a systematic search of this sector. Sarah's blood ran cold. They're looking for him. No doubt, David said, his markings flaring brighter as his enhanced senses kicked in. But they're not just looking for me, they're looking for all of us, the marked, because they know what we represent. And what's that? James asked. Though Sarah suspected she already knew the answer, David's eyes blazed with an inner fire that matched the patterns on his back. Proof that their divine authority is a lie. Evidence that humanity doesn't need gods or masters. We need to find the others, all of them. Because I have a feeling that whatever the architects were preparing us for, it's just beginning. As alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the horizon's edge, Sarah realized their quiet research mission had just become something far more dangerous. They weren't just studying an anomaly anymore. They were harboring the first member of what might be humanity's next evolutionary step, and the self-proclaimed gods of the galaxy were coming to stop them, 2 weeks after their narrow escape. From the ascended patrol fleet, the horizon's edge had become something Dr. Sarah Mitchell never expected. A sanctuary for the impossible word of David Chen's unique condition had spread through underground human networks faster than any encrypted message, and now her research vessel was playing host to 3 more individuals who claimed to carry similar marks. Maria Santos arrived first, smuggled aboard a mining transport from Europa Station. The 40-year-old engineer bore scars on her arms that glowed with the same ethereal light as David's, though her patterns were different, more geometric, like circuit boards etched into flesh. She had survived what the Ascended called a purification ritual when they discovered her stealing their mining equipment to help human workers. They strapped me to this altar made of the same crystal material, Maria explained to the assembled team. Expected me to burn for my sins against their divine order. Instead, I absorbed their purification fire and used it to melt my way out of their temple. Took half their mining operation. With me, Robert Kim's story was perhaps the most disturbing. The soft-spoken scientist had been conducting forbidden research into ascended technology when they caught him. His marks covered his hands and forearms, giving him an intuitive understanding of alien machinery that defied explanation. Can feel their technology now, Robert said, holding up his glowing palms. Every circuit, every power flow, every weakness. It's like having a blueprint downloaded directly into my brain. The ascended device that was supposed to erase. My mind instead gave me the ability to turn their own weapons against them. The third arrival shocked everyone, including David. Lisa Rodriguez was barely 22, a former fighter pilot who had been captured after flying what should have been a suicide mission against an ascended dreadnought. The marks on her back formed wing-like patterns that seemed to move when she wasn't looking. I can see things before they happen, Lisa admitted during her medical examination. Not everything, but energy patterns, weapon trajectories, enemy movements in their judgment chamber. I saw my own death 1,000 times, but I also saw the path through it. The fire knew I belonged to something greater. Monitor 4 had been working around the clock to analyze the new arrivals. Each subject displays unique nanite integration patterns, the AI reported. Mr. Chen's focus on physical enhancement, Ms. Santos on energy manipulation, Mr. Kim on technological interface, and Ms. Rodriguez on temporal perception. It appears the ancient technology adapts to individual psychological profiles. Dr. Sarah Mitchell studied the comparative scans on her holographic display. It's like each person receives exactly the abilities they need to fulfill a specific role. But a role in what? David had been quiet during most of the examinations, but now he spoke up. I've been thinking about what High Curator Vental said, about the architects leaving behind tests. What if this isn't random? What if we're being gathered for a purpose? Before anyone could respond, James Park burst into the laboratory with urgent news. Sarah, you need to see this. Monitor 4 has detected something incredible in the ship's long-range sensors. The AI's voice filled the room. I have been continuously scanning for similar energy signatures across known space. My analysis indicates there are at least 47 other individuals displaying compatible nanite integration patterns. They are scattered across 12 different star systems. Sarah felt her breath catch. 47 others? The number continues to grow as my search parameters expand. However, there is concerning data as well. Ascended fleets are actively hunting these individuals. Several signatures have disappeared in the past week, likely indicating capture or elimination. Maria stepped forward. We have to find them first, get to them before the Ascended do. With what resources? James asked. Practically, we're a single research vessel. The Ascended have an entire galactic empire. Lisa's eyes, suddenly, went wide, and she gripped the edge of the examination table. Ships, I can see ships, human vessels changing course, heading toward us. They're bringing more of the marked. David moved to support her as she swayed. How many? 7 ships, maybe 8. They'll be here within 2 days, but Lisa's expression darkened. The Ascended are tracking them. There's going to be a battle. Monitor 4 confirmed Lisa's vision minutes later as long-range sensors detected the approaching vessels, human ships inbound from multiple vectors. However, I am also detecting Ascended pursuit craft. The enemy will arrive approximately 6 hours after the human vessels. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month ago. James, prepare the ship for maximum occupancy. Monitor 4. Establish secure communications with the incoming vessels. We're going to make a stand. Dr. Mitchell, the AI responded. Our research vessel is not designed for combat. We have minimal defensive capabilities against Ascended technology. Maybe the ship isn't designed for combat, David said, his markings beginning to pulse with increased intensity. But we are the 4 of us working together. We've never tested our combined abilities. Robert held up his hands, watching the patterns shift across his palms. I can feel the ship's systems with David's strength, Maria's energy manipulation, and Lisa's precognition. We might be able to turn the horizon's edge into something the Ascended aren't prepared for. Over the next 2 days, the research vessel transformed into something unprecedented. The arriving ships brought 16 more marked individuals, each with unique abilities granted by their encounter with the ancient judgment devices. There was Alex Thompson, whose marks allowed him to phase through solid matter. Elena Vasquez, who could generate electromagnetic pulses that disabled electronic systems, and Michael Brown, who possessed perfect accuracy with any projectile weapon. Each new arrival added another piece to a puzzle that was beginning to reveal its true scope. We're not just random survivors, David realized as he watched the marked working together to modify the ship's systems. We're a team. Each of us represents a different aspect of human potential. The architects weren't just testing for worthiness, they were selecting for complementary abilities. Sarah nodded as she reviewed Monitor 4's analysis of the group dynamics. It's like they knew exactly what combination of skills would be needed. But for what? Her question was answered when the Ascended fleet finally arrived. 12 massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their crystalline hulls gleaming with divine authority. But instead of the quick capture mission they had planned, they found themselves facing something that defied their understanding. 20 marked humans working in perfect coordination had turned a civilian research vessel into a weapon that channeled the same ancient technology the Ascended had been using for millennia. But where the aliens had used it for control and punishment, humanity was using it for protection and liberation. As the first energy beams lanced out from the Ascended flagship, Lisa called out targeting coordinates that allowed Robert to redirect the ship's power systems. Maria absorbed the incoming fire and channeled it back through modified shield arrays, while David's enhanced reflexes coordinated the entire defense. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its true potential to the galaxy. But more importantly, it was the moment the marked realized they were more than just survivors. They were the inheritors of something ancient and powerful, and their awakening was just the beginning. As the last ascended vessel retreated in confusion and terror, Sarah looked around at her transformed ship. And crew monitor 4, how many more are out there? My latest scans indicate the number is growing exponentially, Dr. Mitchell. It appears that news of this engagement is inspiring more humans to seek out judgment chambers rather than flee from them. The awakening is accelerating. David smiled grimly as he watched the ascended fleet disappear into hyperspace. Good. Let them run. Let them tell their masters that humanity refuses to bow. Because this is only the beginning. We're going to find every judgment chamber in the galaxy. And we're going to show the universe what happens when gods try to judge those who were meant to replace them. The captured ascended warrior hung suspended in the modified holding cell, its crystalline exoskeleton dim and powerless. For the first time in galactic history, one of the self-proclaimed gods was imprisoned by those they considered inferior. Dr. Sarah Mitchell watched through the reinforced viewing port as David Chen entered the cell, his marked skin glowing softly in the artificial light. 3 days had passed since the battle that saw 20 marked humans defeat an entire ascended patrol fleet. The victory had sent shockwaves through both human and alien communities across the galaxy, but it had also raised more questions than it answered, the most pressing of which stood before them now. "Tell me about the architects," David said quietly, his enhanced senses reading the alien's emotional state. "Tell me what you really know about the judgment chambers." The Ascended, who had identified itself as Sub-Curator Meltherin, remained silent for long minutes. Its insectoid features were difficult to read, but Sarah could see something that looked remarkably like fear in its multifaceted eyes. "You should not exist," the alien finally whispered. "The fire was meant to purify, to separate the worthy from the defiled. You were supposed to burn." Maria Santos stepped closer to the viewing port, her own marks pulsing with restrained energy. "But we didn't burn, did we? We became something you never expected." Meltherin's head turned toward her voice. "The marks you carry, the marks of the defiant ones. We have spent 10,000 cycles trying to prevent this awakening. Monitor 4's sensors detected elevated stress levels in the prisoner. The subject's biometric readings indicate extreme psychological distress. Its fear responses are off the charts." Robert Kim looked up from his analysis of the alien's technology. "It's not just afraid of us, it's afraid of what we represent, aren't you, Meltherin? Afraid that everything your people have claimed about divinity is about to be exposed as a lie." The ascended warrior's exoskeleton began to tremble. "We are divine. We have ruled the galaxy since before your species learned to use fire. We brought order to chaos, purpose to meaningless existence." "No," David said firmly, his markings flaring brighter. "You found something that didn't belong to you and used it to control others. The judgment chambers, the divine fire, all of it. You stole it from the architects, didn't you?" Meltheran's silence was answer enough. Lisa Rodriguez entered the holding area, her precognitive abilities having guided her to this moment. "I can see it, the truth you're trying to hide. Your people weren't always gods. You were servants. Servants to beings so advanced that you can barely comprehend them even now. The architects transcended physical form eons ago," Meltheran admitted, its voice breaking. "They left behind their technology, their tests, their judgment. We were chosen as guardians, tasked with ensuring no lesser species could misuse their legacy." Sarah leaned forward. "But you did misuse it. You turned their tests into tools of oppression. We maintained order." The alien protested. "Do you know what chaos existed before our rule? Species destroying themselves, worlds burned by nuclear fire, entire civilizations collapsing into barbarism. We brought peace through divine authority." "You brought slavery," Maria said coldly. "You convinced everyone that they needed gods to rule over them, but the architects weren't looking for servants, were they? They were looking for equals." Meltherin's compound eyes fixed on her with something approaching terror. "The tests were never meant to create more gods. They were meant to identify species capable of succession, to find those who could inherit the architect legacy without destroying themselves or others." David felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "That's why the nanites adapt to individual psychology. They're not just enhancing us, they're preparing us, testing whether humanity has the wisdom to handle that kind of power. And we're failing that test every time we submit to false authority, Robert added. The marks only appear on those who refuse to bow, those who defy gods. Monitor 4 had been analyzing Meltharan's biometric data throughout the interrogation. Dr. Mitchell, I am detecting significant changes in the subject's brain chemistry. Its fear responses are being replaced by something resembling resignation. The ascended warrior slowly lifted its head. You want to know the truth? The complete truth that we have hidden for millennia? Sarah nodded. All of it. Meltharan's exoskeleton began to shift color, displaying patterns that Sarah realized were probably their equivalent of emotional expression. The architects did not disappear. They are waiting somewhere, beyond the galactic rim, in a realm we cannot reach. They left instructions. When a species proves worthy by passing their tests, when enough individuals carry the marks of defiance, the path to them will be revealed. How many? David asked, how many marked humans do we need? The ancient texts speak of a minimum threshold 1,000 individuals, distributed across the galaxy, all connected by the nanite network. When that number is reached, the architect beacons will activate. Lisa's eyes went wide as a vision struck her. I can see them beacons scattered across dead worlds waiting to awaken. They're connected to something massive, something that spans the entire galaxy. A network, Robert breathed, his technological intuition picking up on the implications. The judgment chambers aren't separate devices. They're nodes in a vast communication system. Every time someone receives the marks, the network grows stronger. Meltharan nodded. Reluctantly, each marked individual becomes a living relay. The nanites don't just enhance your abilities, they connect you to every other awakened human across space. When the threshold is reached, you will be able to coordinate as a single organism. Sarah felt a chill at the implications. A hive mind? Not a hive mind, David corrected, understanding flooding through him. Something better, individual consciousness preserved but connected. Imagine the combined knowledge, skills, and perspectives of 1,000 enhanced humans working together. That is what we feared most, Meltharan admitted, a species that could cooperate without losing individual identity. Beings who could wield the power of gods without the corruption that power brings. The architects designed their tests to find such a race. We have spent millennia ensuring they would never succeed. Maria's energy manipulation abilities were picking up on something the others couldn't sense. The network is already forming. I can feel it every time a new human receives the marks. The connection grows stronger. We're not just individuals anymore. We're part of something larger. Monitor 4's sensors detected the energy fluctuations Maria was describing. Confirmed. The quantum entanglement patterns between marked individuals are intensifying. My calculations suggest the network effect will reach critical mass far sooner than expected. How many are there now? Sarah asked. Based on my continuous scans, approximately 237 confirmed marked individuals across known space. However, the rate of new awakenings is accelerating exponentially. Word of our victory has inspired humans throughout the galaxy to seek out judgment chambers rather than flee from them. Meltharan's color patterns shifted to what appeared to be despair. You don't understand what you're unleashing. The architects were powerful beyond imagination. Their technology could reshape reality itself, in the wrong hands. But not in human hands, David interrupted. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're not afraid we'll abuse their power. You're afraid we'll use it to free the galaxy from your rule. We have maintained stability for 10,000 cycles, the alien protested weakly. Peace through divine order. What will you replace it with? Chaos? Democracy? The failed experiments of species that destroyed themselves? Lisa stepped forward, her precognitive abilities showing her glimpses of possible futures. We'll replace it with freedom, the right of every species to determine their own destiny. No more false gods, no more divine authority, just beings making their own choices and living with the consequences. Robert's analysis of ascended technology had revealed something crucial. Your own people are starting to question your authority. I can see it in your technology descent subroutines, hidden communication channels. Even among the Ascended, there are those who doubt. Meltharin's exoskeleton went completely dark. The young ones, they have always questioned the old ways. They wonder if perhaps the time of gods should end. Sarah realized they had reached a turning point. Meltharan, you have a choice. You can help us find the remaining judgment chambers, help more humans awaken to their potential, or you can watch as everything your people built crumbles anyway because this awakening can't be stopped now. The captured Ascended considered this for long minutes. When it finally spoke, its voice carried the weight of eons. There are 17 major judgment sites remaining ancient worlds where the architect technology is strongest. If you can awaken enough humans at these sites, the network will reach critical mass. David felt the marks on his back pulse with anticipation. And then the path to the architects will open, and you will face the ultimate test. The choice between power and wisdom, between domination and service. The choice that will determine whether humanity is truly worthy of their legacy. Monitor 4 interrupted with urgent news. Dr. Mitchell, I am detecting massive fleet movements throughout Ascended space. It appears they are mobilizing their entire military to prevent us from reaching the remaining judgment sites. Sarah looked around at the marked individuals who had transformed her research mission into something far greater. Then we'd better move fast. How many ships do we have now? 43 vessels have joined our growing fleet. More arrive daily. Humans from across the galaxy are abandoning their lives to join this awakening. David smiled grimly. Then it's time to finish what the architects started, time to show the galaxy what happens when a species refuses to accept that gods know better, Meltharin. Will you help us? The Ascended warrior looked up at him with something that might have been hope. Perhaps it is time for gods to step down and for worthy beings to take their place. But know this, human. The final test will be harder than anything you have faced. The architects will judge not just your power but your character, your willingness to sacrifice for others, your ability to wield infinite power without being corrupted by it. Then we'll face that test together. Maria said, all of us as humans, as equals, as the inheritors of something greater than any god. As the horizon's edge prepared to lead humanity's growing fleet toward the remaining judgment sites, Sarah realized they were no longer just fighting for freedom. They were fighting for the right to determine their own destiny. And perhaps the destiny of every species in the galaxy. 5 months after the first awakening, the galaxy burned with rebellion. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the flagship Prometheus, watching as the combined human fleet emerged from hyperspace above the dead world of Kepler Prime. Below them lay one of the most significant architect sites ever discovered, a massive complex that housed dozens of judgment chambers in perfect preservation status. Report, Sarah called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had evolved from scientist to revolutionary leader. The bridge around her buzzed with activity as marked humans coordinated the largest military operation in human history. David Chen, now serving as tactical coordinator, stepped up beside her. His markings had grown more complex over the months, spreading across his arms and chest in intricate patterns that seemed to shift based on his thoughts. 230 ships in our main fleet, another 400 vessels converging from other operations across the galaxy. The Ascended are throwing everything they have at us, but they're too late. Through the viewports, Sarah could see the Ascended defense fleet maintaining position around Kepler Prime 50. Massive dreadnoughts surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels, their crystalline hulls gleaming with divine menace. It should have been an impossible battle, but everything had changed since the network began to truly activate. How many Mark do we have aboard the fleet? Sarah asked. Maria Santos looked up from her engineering station. 873 confirmed, plus another 200 who received partial awakening at the Titan colony site. The network connection is stronger than we've ever experienced. Sarah could feel it herself, though she wasn't one of the marked. The enhanced humans around her moved with perfect coordination, their individual abilities amplified by their quantum-entangled connection. What had started as isolated awakenings had become something approaching collective consciousness. While still preserving individual identity, Robert Kim's voice came through the communications array from his position aboard the tech ship, Archimedes. I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the planet's surface. The judgment chambers are responding to our presence. They know we're here. Lisa Rodriguez, now serving as the fleet's strategic precognitive advisor, suddenly stiffened at her station. The Ascended are about to make their move, Admiral. Korthek himself is commanding their fleet. He's going to try to destroy the planet rather than let us reach the chambers. David's markings flared as he accessed the tactical network. All ships prepare for immediate assault. The enemy cannot be allowed to damage the architect sites. This is our chance to push the awakening past the critical threshold. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its ascendancy to the galaxy. The marked humans didn't just fight as individuals, they fought. As a single organism with 1,000 enhanced minds working in perfect harmony, ships moved in impossible formations, weapons fired with preternatural accuracy, and ascended technology was turned against itself by humans who understood it better than its creators. Sarah watched in amazement as the fleet carved through ascended defenses like they were made of paper. Monitor 4, are you recording all of this? Indeed, Dr. Mitchell. The tactical innovations being displayed exceed all previous human military doctrine. The marked individuals are demonstrating capabilities that should be theoretically impossible. On the surface of Kepler Prime, the first landing parties had already reached the ancient complex. Sarah watched through transmitted feeds as teams of marked humans moved through halls that hadn't seen visitors in millions of years. The architecture was unlike anything from known civilizations. Organic curves that seemed to grow from the ground itself, walls that pulsed with their own inner light. Contact with the judgment chambers established, reported Alex Thompson, whose phasing abilities had allowed him to penetrate the complex's sealed sections. Sarah, you need to see this. These aren't just testing devices. They're something much more significant. The transmitted images showed a vast circular chamber filled with crystalline structures that dwarfed even the largest ascended constructs. But these crystals weren't just tools. They were alive, pulsing with consciousness that seemed to recognize the approaching humans. Elena Vasquez's electromagnetic abilities allowed her to interface directly with the ancient systems. The chambers are communicating with each other, not just here but across the entire galaxy. Every judgment site we've activated is part of a massive network, and it's almost complete. David coordinated the surface operation from the flagship. How many more awakenings do we need? Based on the network resonance patterns, approximately 127 more individuals. The chambers here can accommodate at least 300 simultaneous awakenings. This could be the final push. Sarah felt her heart race at the implications. Signal all available human personnel. Anyone willing to undergo the awakening process should report to the surface. This is our chance to reach the threshold. Over the next 6 hours, as the orbital battle raged above them, hundreds of human volunteers entered the judgment chambers on Kepler Prime. But these weren't the terrifying ordeals that earlier humans had endured. With the network nearly complete, the process had become something almost gentle, a welcoming rather than a test. Michael Brown emerged from his chamber with markings that covered his entire torso. His perfect accuracy now extended to predicting enemy movements across entire star systems. Jennifer Walsh discovered she could manipulate gravity itself, while Thomas Lee found he could phase matter between dimensions. Network approaching critical mass. Monitor 4 announced as more humans joined the quantum entangled collective. Current count, 996 confirmed marked individuals, threshold achievement imminent. But the Ascended weren't finished. Admiral Korthek's remaining forces launched a desperate assault on the planet's surface, attempting to destroy the judgment chambers before the awakening could be completed. Crystalline bombardment rained down from orbit as Ascended ground forces engaged the human defenders. It was then that the true power of the awakened network revealed itself. The marked humans on the surface didn't just defend themselves. They reached out through quantum entanglement to every other awakened human across the galaxy. For the first time, the entire network activated simultaneously. Sarah felt it, even from orbit. a pulse of consciousness that connected every enhanced human in existence. Suddenly, battles that had been raging on dozens of worlds shifted as the Marked coordinated their efforts across impossible distances. Ascended fleets found themselves facing enemies who could predict their every move, counter their every strategy, and turn their own technology against them. Threshold achieved, Monitor 4 announced. 1,014 confirmed Marked individuals online network integration complete. I am detecting massive energy discharges from 17 different star systems. David's markings blazed so brightly they were visible through his clothing. The beacons, they're activating. I can feel them. All of them. They're showing us the way. Across the galaxy, on dead worlds and hidden moons, ancient architect beacons came to life for the first time in eons. They painted a path through space that led beyond the galactic rim, toward something that waited in the void between galaxies. Lisa's precognitive abilities showed her glimpses of what lay ahead. There's something out there, something vast. The architects didn't disappear. They're waiting for us, but first. Her expression darkened. First, we have to pass one final test. As the Ascended fleet retreated in defeat and confusion, Sarah realized their crusade was entering its final phase. Humanity had proven it could work together without losing individual identity. They had demonstrated the courage to defy false gods and the wisdom to use power responsibly. But the greatest challenge still lay ahead. Somewhere beyond the stars, the architects waited to judge whether humanity was truly ready to inherit their legacy. And the test they would face would determine not just the future of the human race, but the destiny of every species in the galaxy. The journey to the edge of known space took 3 months, with the combined human fleet following beacon signals that led them farther from home than any of their species had ever traveled. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching as they approached something that defied comprehension, a construct the size of a solar system, hidden in the void between galaxies. Architectural analysis indicates the structure is approximately 4 billion years old, Monitor 4 reported. The engineering principles involved exceed current understanding by several orders of magnitude. This appears to be what the ancient texts referred to as the architect homeworld. David Chen joined Sarah at the viewing port, his markings now covering most of his visible skin in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living circuit boards. The network connection had grown so strong that the 1,000 marked humans could communicate without words, sharing thoughts and experiences across the vast distances of their scattered fleet. They're here, David said quietly. I can feel them. Not physical anymore, but present, waiting. They've been watching our progress, evaluating every choice we've made. The construct ahead of them was beautiful beyond description. Crystalline spires stretched across impossible distances, connected by bridges of pure energy that pulsed with colors that had no names. At its center sat a sphere of what appeared to be liquid starlight, rotating slowly as if it were the heart of some cosmic machine. Maria Santos's voice came through. The fleet communications from her position aboard the engineering vessel Newton. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever that central sphere is, it's generating power equivalent to an entire star, but it's contained, controlled. This is technology that could reshape reality itself. As the human fleet approached the outer perimeter of the construct, massive gateways began to open in the crystalline walls. Each ship was guided by unseen forces toward individual docking bays, as if the architects had been expecting exactly this number of vessels. Robert Kim's technological intuition was working overtime as they docked. The docking procedures are automatic, but they're adapting to our ship designs. The architects built this place to accommodate any species that might eventually find it. They really were planning for succession. Sarah led a group of representatives toward what appeared to be the main entrance to the construct. The moment they stepped onto the crystalline surface, the markings on every marked human began to glow with unprecedented intensity. The quantum network that connected them expanded, suddenly including something vast and ancient. Welcome. Inheritors. The voice came not through their ears but directly into their consciousness. We have waited long for your arrival. Lisa Rodriguez's precognitive abilities showed her glimpses of what was to come. There are others here. Not the architects themselves, but representatives? Echoes? They've been waiting in this place for eons. The group was led through corridors that seemed to extend into infinity, past chambers filled with technologies that could have transformed entire civilizations, matter converters that could reshape, planets, consciousness transfer devices that could preserve minds for eternity, and star forges capable of creating new suns. You see the tools we have prepared. The ancient voice continued. Power beyond the dreams of your ancestors, but tools are meaningless without wisdom. Before you can inherit our legacy, you must prove you understand the true meaning of power. They were brought to a vast central chamber where the liquid starlight sphere rotated slowly above them. Around its base stood 12 crystalline pedestals, each one designed to accommodate a human form. Sarah realized with growing understanding what was being asked of them. A test, she whispered. One final test. The 12 most experienced marked humans stepped forward. David, Maria, Robert, Lisa, and 8 others who had been with them since the early days of the awakening. As they approached the pedestals, the voice of the architects filled their minds once more. You have shown courage in defying false gods. You have demonstrated wisdom in working together while preserving individual identity. Now you must show the greatest virtue of all, the willingness to sacrifice power for the greater good. The pedestals activated, and each of the 12 found themselves connected directly to the central sphere. Through the connection, they could feel the full scope of architect technology. The ability to reshape matter and energy at will, power to travel between dimensions, the capacity to seed life throughout the universe or to end it with a thought. But with the power came understanding. The architects hadn't transcended physical form by choice. They had been forced to abandon their bodies when the temptation of absolute power threatened to corrupt them. Only by becoming beings of pure consciousness, connected to but not controlling their technology, had they preserved their wisdom. You could take this power for yourselves. The voice offered, become as gods, rule the galaxy with wisdom and justice. No species would dare oppose you. No tyrant could challenge your authority. You could bring peace through strength, order through dominion. Sarah watched as the 12 marked humans struggled with the temptation. Through the network connection, she could feel their thoughts. The power being offered was intoxicating. With it, they could end all suffering, prevent all wars, guide every species toward enlightenment. All it would cost was their humanity. David's voice came through. The network, strained but determined. No, this isn't what we fought for. We didn't defy the ascended just to become new gods. We fought for freedom, for the right of every being to choose their own path. One by one, the other 11 reached the same conclusion. Maria's energy manipulation showed her how the power could be used to force peace. Robert's technological insight revealed how it could ensure prosperity. Lisa's precognition showed her futures where humanity ruled wisely and justly, but they all saw the same inevitable endpoint. Power without accountability led to stagnation. Wisdom imposed from above was not true wisdom, and gods, no matter how benevolent, were still tyrants. We refuse, Maria said firmly. We didn't earn the right to make choices for others. Every species deserves to find their own way. The ancient voice carried what sounded like satisfaction. Then you have passed the final test. You have proven worthy, not of becoming gods, but of becoming guardians. The power will remain here, available to any species that proves worthy, but you will ensure that it is never misused. The connection to the central sphere shifted. Instead of overwhelming power, the 12 found themselves connected to something more profound. Knowledge, understanding. The accumulated wisdom of a civilization that had existed for billions of years. You will return to your galaxy as teachers, not rulers. You will help other species find their own paths to enlightenment, and when they are ready, you will guide them here, to face the same choice you have faced. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she understood the true scope of what humanity had inherited. Not power over others, but responsibility for their growth. Not dominion over the galaxy, but guardianship of its potential. The markings on the 12 began to change, evolving into new patterns that seemed to contain the knowledge of ages when they finally stepped away from the pedestals. They were no longer just enhanced humans. They were something new, bridges between what was and what could be. As the human fleet prepared to return to their home galaxy, they carried with them not conquest, but hope. The Ascended would learn that their time as false gods was over. Other species would discover that they too could earn the right to determine their own destinies, and somewhere in the void between galaxies, the architect construct would wait for the next species to prove themselves worthy of the ultimate test. David stood once more at the observation deck as they began their journey home. His markings now told the story of every species that had ever faced the choice between power and wisdom. Most had failed. Some had destroyed themselves, but a few, like humanity, had chosen the harder path. Monitor 4, he said quietly. Final log entry for the Awakening Project. Ready to record, David. Analysis complete. The humans have proven that divinity is not claimed, but earned through defiance of tyranny and service to others. We return not as conquerors, but as gardeners. Our job is to help the galaxy grow, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be worthy of the trust that's been placed in us. As the fleet entered hyperspace for the long journey home, the marks on their backs continued to glow. They were no longer just symbols of defiance. They were promises that the age of false gods was ending, and that the age of true freedom was about to begin.